Welcome to Around Kitsap. We're here to talk about the Forest Stewardship Plan with Kitsap County that Kitsap County Commissioners have adopted so far, and there's some more steps to go. With me to start our program is Jim Dunwitty. Jim is the Director of Parks and Recreation for the county, and we are at Newberry Hill Heritage Park, and what a beautiful spot.
Thank you. It's the newest addition to our inventory.
Yeah. So give us the overview of the size of this piece of property and some of the pieces that came all together.
Well, we're over 1,200 acres in the middle of Kitsap County. I wish I could take credit for assembling all the parcels here, but it's something that started coming about 5 years ago. Some land swaps, some purchases with state funds, and uh, a, a couple of partnerships with the boards of education.
So Jim, tell us about the overview of the forest stewardship plan. How did it come about? How long has the Parks Department and volunteers been working on it?
Well, the Parks Department just got involved this past March when the commissioners decided if they adopted the policy, it would be part of the Parks Department and a new division. This program has actually been developed over the last couple years, initiated by Commissioner Steve Bauer a few years ago, and we were able to assemble quite a few of the community groups and environmental groups to work on a plan to address a situation we all had to deal with. Kitsap County, we're proud to have about 6,400 acres of parkland. Kitsap County also has an additional 800 acres with Public Works and Department of Community Affairs. So we're talking 7,000 acres of open space in Kitsap County. Great thing for Kitsap County. What we found that approximately 4,000 of the acres are all old tree plantations. So that property all looks the same, all has tree canopies. We're now dealing with trying to figure out how to address bringing back other wildlife into the area, providing some diversification. So where I'm from in the east, if we were talking about taking down some trees, we would have quite a few people that really couldn't understand what we were doing here. I think that's a positive about being here in the Northwest is people understand that to make the forest healthier, you do have to remove some trees. So that's a project that's been developed over the last 2 years. Mainly Arnold Bergstrom from WSU has taken the lead for the last 2 years with working with community groups, and we have developed this policy.
So Arno and the Washington State University Extension got the stewardship groups together. I know there's a group with Illahee and North Kitsap Heritage Park, Banner. The list goes on and on. So Arno really started the work then?
Arno kind of picked it up.
Okay.
It was a thought by Commissioner Bauer a few years ago.
Got it.
We actually had an individual with the Navy who does forestry and logging, and Walter Jones, or Walter Briggs, excuse me, and he started giving some of the applications that the Navy uses. In terms of forest management, and Arno kind of picked up the ball and has been taking this at the road show for the last couple of years.
Public input, very, very, very important. What's the next steps um, that the county's going to do with this plan or the policy?
The policy was adopted just a couple of weeks ago in October. We're coming up with an implementation plan. With the commissioners, we decided this is going to be a 4-year pilot project, knowing that this program, being successful, will last for 30 years. There's 30 years worth of work, and we figure at the end of 30 years you have to start all over again.
Right, right.
But we were working on the implementation plan. We will be developing a community stewardship advisory group for the forest program as part of our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. That will probably come about in January. Fortunately, we already have our poster child of the program and the policy, and that being Newberry Hill Heritage Park Stewardship Group that has really embraced this program, and thanks to some people, have actually been our representative to the community to explaining it, not only to the community, but explaining it to me. So it looks like we're going to be able to use this area as one of our first projects. We're very excited about it. We know that we're ready to expand into North Kitsap Heritage Park soon. So with the first couple of years, I think we're going to be looking at this area, and North Kitsap as our pilot project.
Wow, lots of work. So that's a good segue for you to introduce my next guest. Tell us a little bit about Frank Strickland.
Frank Strickland, over the last couple of months, I've been able to lean on Frank to explain this program to me and to explain it to our park board, but also to the community. Frank has a great way of presenting some very complex issues in a way that people can understand. And I was the test case, and I understood it maybe the second time, not the first time, but I've sat through Frank's presentation 5 times. I'm so excited I want to go and sit through his wetlands presentation at some time. I promise this. Frank has been a great advocate of this program. I think right when I first started, Frank didn't really understand why we're adding this park as well as the forest management program. But over the last couple of months, you know, Old Tex and the Clear Creek Trail has been my hero since day one, and I've added one to that list, and that's Frank Strickland. A great resource for the county. He's a volunteer. I've increased his pay 3 times. I might have to do it the 4th time.
Oh, that's awesome. He's really moving up.
Yeah, he's really moving up. So if we want to introduce Frank now,
Yeah.
again, Frank can actually explain how our policy and our program is going to be applied to the natural areas like Newberry Hill.
Excellent. Very good. Stay with us. We'll be right back, and Frank Strickland's going to join us. Welcome back to Around Kitsap. With me now is the infamous Frank Strickland. We just heard Jim Dunwoody, our Director of Parks and Rec for the county, introduce Frank. Frank, you are revered throughout the county, and we thank you so much for your work here, especially in Newberry Hill Heritage Park. Frank, tell us about your background first. What was your prior life to being so interested in this park? What did you do?
I worked as a metrologist, which is scientific measurements for the U.S. Navy for 30 years, retired, and then worked for Lockheed for 5. And the last part of my career at Keyport, I got involved in the red water contamination at Bangor, which introduced me to environmental concerns in the Northwest. I was involved in the cleanup of that water, and I felt really good about it. So I started getting interested in limnology, which is the study of water, inland lakes and ponds, and because my recreational hobby is fishing, this kind of all tied together. And now that I've retired, I want to put something back into the community that's been so good for my family. We raised 2 boys here, one with special needs and one gifted, and this community is just fantastic.
Oh, wow, that's a great story. But the 2 words, metrology and limnology really caught my ear when I was introduced to Frank. Those skills, metrics, not metrics, but the whole analysis of that is what your background is all about.
Right, so that helps me measure water chemistry, dissolved oxygen, pH, and things like that are crucial to wildlife habitat. And that's what this management plan is really about. It's about wildlife habitat, improving the habitat here in the park.
Frank, do you live close to this park?
I do. I live on the north side of the park, on Hideaway Lane. And I've lived there for about 30 years. So I'm close to the park, so I'm in here 3 to 4 times a week, usually pulling noxious weeds.
Hey, that's another good one, noxious weeds. There we go. So you have been really involved in specifically this park. And are you in this park at least once a week, twice a week, 4 times?
Yeah, 2 to 4 times a week, depending on the weather. I try to get in every Monday with my disabled son. He helps me pull Scotch broom, and that's good exercise for him and good for the park. We've been doing a lot of training, getting up to speed to do things properly in the park, because you need a concerted approach, not helter-skelter. So I train with WSU as a stream steward, and I train with the Department of Ecology as a wetland evaluator for the state of Washington under Dr. Thomas Hubry, PhD, very great guy with the water. So I try to get my credentials in order, and my latest credentials are with Peg Tillery on the
Meaning guru. She's elevated you to guru.
she's the weed and bush guru.
That's right. She
But she got me up to speed on native plants. I just finished the native plant advisor course with WSU also. So all this
What a
is for
wonderful
this park.
resource that is,
It is.
WSU Extension. It's
They've been
fabulous.
they've been a great resource for us here in the park. Yeah.
So let's start with the good things in this, specifically your park, Newberry Hill Heritage Park. What are the good things on this property?
Wow, the whole thing is good. It's a matter of making it better because it's a mostly disturbed habitat. The habitat in here was DNR property and was kind of run like a farm, and we're going to show you that later. That's as one of the challenges we're facing that this forest management plan will address. Basically, the good things about it are it's a wildlife corridor. We've kept the stewards, the Newberry Hill Heritage Park stewards under Tom Coleman as the president, have kept wildlife corridors in mind so that the wildlife have a way to transfer, to move back and forth north and south. We've kept the public in mind as a recreational asset. Educational asset for the county. We're tied closely with Clahalia Secondary School where the environmental students come out here and do work and learn about environmental sciences. The church groups in Kitsap County come out and help us. There are hiking trails. There are about 15 miles of trails currently. One of the hard things we had to do was close 5 miles of trails that were in sensitive wetland areas, and we appreciate everyone respecting that and understanding that. It's just not a good place for a trail. We hope to add one more trail so that someday you'll be able to enter this park and go clear to Belfair in the woods, either on a horse or a mountain bike or on foot. That's the long-range plan for the trails in Kitsap.
Oh, that would be phenomenal.
That would be, and with this piece of property acquisition ties us on the south end to the DNR Green Mountain Forest. And once we'll have to build a bridge across Wildcat Creek, and then we'll be tied in all the way.
Wow, that's fabulous to be able to go through the woods all the way to Belfair. Before we talk about the bad things in the in this park, can you tell us the boundaries of the park? This is Seebeck Highway. Tell us the boundaries.
The
please.
boundaries on the north are Newberry Hill Road, and then if you go west on Newberry Hill Road to the Chevron station and turn left, you're headed south toward Bremerton. The park is basically on your left all the way to the Kitsap Rifle and Revolver Club, and then it crosses the Seebeck Highway at the Holly Junction where the flashing yellow light is, and then goes south for another 120 acres, and that's the piece that ties into the DNR. Perfect. It's a wonderful piece over there, and there's currently no trails in it. And it's also part of this area we're in now, which is called the RCO area, which means it was purchased with the Recreational Conservation Organization funds, and it has special wildlife restrictions on it for urban wildlife protection. And
Wow.
we're going to put one trail through there only to protect the coho and the beaver ponds down there. It's just beautiful in there.
On our hike up here, we did hike up to this ridge. We saw, how big was the beaver dam you pointed out to us?
The beaver dam is 130 feet long or so and about 8 feet high, and it augments the water level. There are 5 type A wetlands in this park, and there are 23 type B wetlands in this park. So one of the beautiful things about this park that's kind of unique to it is the amount of water that we have. And for flood control in the Chico watershed, this area is crucial. So this water soaks into the ground, and that water in the ground is crucial to late summer flows in the creeks for the salmonids that have to live in there until they're old enough to go to sea, which are the coho and the sea run cuts in this particular watershed. The chum come in, hatch, and go out in the spring, so they're not so reliant on that late summer, but it's important.
Frank, you can talk fishing, you can talk biology, you can talk statistics and numbers, And plus, you can talk trees. You are phenomenal. What a resource. What a great guy to have around. So, did we review some of the good things then? The water on this property? What
Yeah.
are some other good things in this park?
Other good things are the recreational opportunities, the educational opportunities for the community, and the solitude of just walking in the woods, getting out of the rush of day-to-day life and taking a little break out here. We have a lot of people that walk their dogs, that jog or ride mountain bikes or horses that come in here. The biggest thing to me is the wildlife, the potential for a diverse wildlife refuge here in Kitsap County is just immense in this park.
Tell us a few of the some of the wildlife you've seen in this park.
I have personally seen in this park the black bear, bobcat. First time this summer I saw the bobcat twice, which was just amazing. We have one cougar that we know of. We have a large pack of coyotes. We have river otter, beaver. The beaver are in here and they're active and they're our partners. They're one of the stakeholders in this park. And we have deer, of course, and birds. Oh my goodness, if you're an Audubon person, this is where you want to come.
Now, Frank, you want to point out this is the good forest.
Yeah, you want to remember that the purpose of the forest management plan is to increase biodiversity and wildlife habitat. If you look here to the left, you'll see different species of trees. There's an alder, there's a hemlock. You'll see different sizes of trees, and you'll see canopies that are lower and canopies that are higher. And if you look back there, you'll see a dead tree. That's a wildlife tree, very important to our woodpeckers that are in the park. It's a standing dead tree. It's a decadent tree. Some that have broken tops and they're dead on top are great eagle perches and raptors. We have all this understory here of vegetation that's full of mast for birds. There's salal, Oregon grape, all kinds of things in here that are important to the birds as a source of food. It's called soft mast. Let's see what else we got in here. That gives you an idea of what we're talking about a diverse species, diverse age, diverse crowns, all kinds of things going on here. We have hardwoods and we have conifers. Contrast that to this. And this is about 60% of the problem in our park. I'm only addressing our park because each park is different. Like the Illahee Preserve doesn't have anything like this. Their forests are much more healthy than ours, so this prescription for this area wouldn't fit necessarily in their park, but it's important here. What's happened here was a clear cut and then a plant by the Department of Natural Resources of Douglas fir, the preferred species. And then they came back in about 20 years and they killed all the competing species underneath the trees so that the Doug fir would get all of the resources for their growth, because the plan was to come back in 50 years and clear cut it again. Our soils in here are such that you can get a crop in the old school way of doing things about every 50 years. What's happened now is these trees are so close together, if you look at their limbs, you'll see they're all dead down here. That's called the stem exclusion phase, where they're not getting enough light to the lower branches. If you see this one right here next to the road, its canopy comes all the way down because it has more sunlight on this side from the road opening.
Right.
So what we need to do, and this is part of the forest management plan, is get in there and take some of those trees out. Not just any tree. We want to take the smallest trees out, because what we're trying to do here is to get large diameter trees. So the biggest ones in there will be left, and we'll make openings.
But they look pretty much uniform. I mean, some are probably a little bigger, but they're all pretty much the same size.
They pretty much are the same size, and that's typical because they've raced to the sun to just stay alive. They have to compete with their neighbors to keep some part of their canopy in the sunlight, because photosynthesis is how they eat. And
How will this be logged? What's the plan for that?
we have insisted on, and it's been agreed to do low impact logging. Preferred method is horse logging, and that limits the tree size because the horses can't take great big trees. So we want low impact logging. There's some equipment in Canada that's experimentally being used right now that it's like a duck walker out of Star Wars or something. You don't want to compact the soils in the forest, but we need to take those trees out of there. And fortunately, these trees have some cash value. They can be sold as chip pulp and some of them as saw logs. And that money should come back to the park to enhance and restore these habitats and diversity. Once we thin it, we'll go in and underplant. The stewards and friends will go in and plant shade-tolerant species. You can see some right here. Here's a western red cedar, and they'll grow underneath there, and that's part of the way the forest should look. Is it should have some cedar and hemlock. Hemlock is another shade-tolerant species that will grow under the canopy. You can't plant Doug fir in there. They'll die because they have to have full sunlight to grow. So this would be what's called thinning from below canopy, or variable density thinning will be applied here. We leave some areas of thick trees for wildlife, some open areas for what's called ecotones. The edges of meadows and things are where a lot of raptors and things hunt. And then we'll spread them out in other places so the crowns will recover and release these trees and they'll take off. So then we have to come back in about 20 years and do it again because they'll start crowding each other out. Here we have habitat for just hundreds of different species of birds, mammals, large and small. There's all kinds of things going on here that are niches for different wildlife, different habitats. That's what it's all about. But we'll see what happens.
And yet this is really, really dense here. It's
is.
dense,
Oh, and
but there's many varieties.
That's another misconception about this plan, is that we're going to cut all the trees down. This is about 200 trees per acre, and that's where we're going to end up. We don't want to make it clear cut at all. There'll be a lot of trees left. And the eco prescription that we've come up with for this area is leave it alone. It's okay. And what we'll do is hazard tree mitigation and then keep an eye on the health of this. But this type is exactly what we want it to look like.
And we're at the northern end of the park. We're right off Newberry Hill Road, and this is the northern end.
Little Anderson Creek is right here on your left. This is the most westerly branch of the creek. And right now there's no coho in there. They come up the stream, but there's a county culvert blocking. We're working on that. We're going to put a bridge across here to keep people out of it. There's a large wetland back here. The stewards are getting permits and whatnot for a bridge for horses and people to go over the wetland without going through it. So lots to do, but it's been fun so far. And I won't get to see if it worked or not. So if we're wrong, laugh at us and fix it. Don't give up.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. That is awesome, Frank. Tell us about this body of water that we're looking at.
This is the largest wetland in the park. It's a natural heritage site as designated by the state of Washington. It's a Category 1 wetland, which is the highest rating that DOE gives any wetland in Washington state. Usually those Category 1s are limited to estuaries, saltwater environments. This is a beautiful body of water. It has native plants, no non-natives. It's shallow, which means it's not a lake. Not for scientists wouldn't call it a lake. They'd call it a palestrine system, which just means it's a shallow body of water.
And how shallow is it?
It's less than 2 meters in most places above the surface. But the most important part of the water here in the park is what you don't see. It's under your feet, because that's the water that we're trying to keep in here. It's very, very important that we understand that. We want downspouts and gutters on our houses, but not in the woods. We want that rain back in the dirt. It's very, very important. This wetland is one of 5 type A's. It's the biggest. And
How big is this, did you say?
I'm not sure. I haven't done it. Like I said, I didn't do the analysis of this. The state of Washington did. The next largest one is 14 acres in size, and then there's another 14-acre one in the north end. But this particular one is a winter rafting area for migrating seabirds. As the winter rains come in, the level rises and basically drowns the emerged macrophytes, which are lily pads and things. It drowns them, and then these birds can land on them. And you can see out there in certain places there's some bufflehead are already here. It's a little early for them, but they're here.
What did you call them again?
Bufflehead. There's wood duck in here, hooded mergansers, bats. Oh, you ought to see the bats in the evening over this, getting the insects. And then there are swallows, field swallows by the thousands out over this pond. So it's very important. And if you like drinking water, this is what it's all about in Kitsap County. This will be your drinking water in about 7 years as it goes back down to that first aquifer. They're doing some more research on that right now to find out.
Absolutely fabulous. This piece of property is really the jewel. And Frank, we want to thank you for all your work. That's really for all of us. Frank is doing this work for the people. That's one of the best things I've heard you say today.
Every time I get a little frustrated, I have somebody come up and say, hey, we really appreciate what you're doing. Or every time I have a little bit of vandalism, somebody will come along and say, here's some money to fix that. The community support in this park is what keeps me going. And all of us stewards that work in here, we have a very good working group of stewards.
Okay. How many stewards are involved?
There's about 12 that are voting stewards. And to become a voting steward, all you have to do is attend 4 consecutive meetings. So we want you on board before you start voting. Great. And then there are about 6 of us that are really active. And then the community, Silverdale Baptist Church, LDS 3rd Ward, Winnick Engineering, AES Consultants. We have a lot of community support that really helps us in here.
If you want to look at the forest stewardship plan, go to the Kitsap County Parks and Rec website, which is on the Kitsap County main page. Go to Parks and you will see it right on the front of that page. Take a look at it. Through that same website, you can probably learn how to become a steward and how you can get involved there.
Right, or we also have our own website.
Oh, good to know.
It's better, Mr. Dunwoody. Sorry, Jim. It's called friendsofnhhp.com, and you can go there and see everything that the stewards are doing in the park. Everything that we've done for the year is archived on there, and you'll get a feel of how we're treating this park as the stakeholders wanted us to when this was formed up. The stakeholders gave input, and they said, these are the things we want done if you're going to do this park. And everything we do, we run by those guidelines before we do it. We give it the old smell test.
Awesome. Totally awesome. Thank you again, Frank. What a jewel, and thanks for all your work for all of us. And thanks for joining us around Kitsap. Make sure to check out the Newberry Hill Heritage Park. Come out and take a walk. Put your eyes on it. We need people with positive experience in this park, and only bring your positive to the park and out of the park as well. Thanks for joining us around Kitsap. We'll see you next time.